If you've been feeling that the world is drifting towards something cold and unrecognizable, if you lie awake wondering how to actually help instead of just shouting into the storm, this video is for you. For the ones who want to make an influence without becoming another loud voice in a crowded room. For the ones who sense that our current way of fixing the world is secretly making it worse. Here's the uncomfortable truth Carl Jung kept pointing to. When we go to war with evil out there, we accidentally recruit the very darkness we think we're defeating. The more we fight each other, the more skilled we become at fighting and the less capable we become of loving. We were taught early on to manage outer problems, to fix other people, to diagnose what's wrong with the world as if it were an appliance. Point, blame, campaign, attack. Meanwhile, the one battlefield that actually decides everything, the interior, remains unvisited. Like a house we never enter, though the door is unlocked. You've seen it. People marching to eliminate hate while hating their opponents with surgical precision. Activists drowning in burnout. Parents exhausted from managing everyone's behavior but starving for their own breath. We were trained to help without being asked. To prescribe our cures to those who aren't ready, to force-feed insight like medicine down a closed throat. And we call it love. But forced love is control wearing a halo. It leaves us hollowed out, resentful, suspicious of compassion itself. Jung would call this a projection machine. Everything we refuse to face in ourselves, we export onto the world and then wage a holy war against. The tyrant we crusade against outside is the unexamined tyrant within. The part that wants certainty, purity, domination. The more we neglect our shadow, the more we staff the world with enemies. The results are predictable. More noise, more certainties, more casualties, and a deeper famine of soul. If you want the world to become gentler, you must become the place where gentleness happens. Not as a performance, not as a brand, quietly. Truly the only way to help the world is to become an example of the very reconciliation the world is starving for. This is not selfishness. It is stewardship. People don't transform because we lecture them. They transform because our presence makes another way plausible. A single person who is no longer at war with their own inner life is one less person recruiting for a war outside. Of course, the world conspires to keep you away from this. The economy of distraction needs your outrage to stay solvent. Infinite scrolls, manufactured emergencies, algorithmic feasts of comparison. Each of them tugging you outward away from your breath, away from the subterranean room where your unlived life is waiting. When the soul is neglected, projection becomes our default user interface. We stop relating and start reacting. We stop seeing and start sorting. We stop creating and start consuming. Here is the pivot. Self-realization is not a retreat from responsibility. It is the birth of real responsibility. When you integrate what you've exiled, the fear, the envy, the need to be right, you become less triggerable, less available for manipulation. Your compassion stops being a performance and becomes a gravity. Solutions start growing from you instead of being imposed by you. This is how the world gets better. One person who no longer needs an enemy to feel whole. So what does becoming the example actually look like? Not as a slogan but as breath-by-breath practice. It begins with the smallest refusals. Refusing to gossip about the very wounds you haven't tended. Refusing to rescue people who never asked. Refusing to outsource your discomfort to a villain of the day. Instead, you turn toward the heat in your own chest and ask with Jung's kind of courage, what part of me is speaking right now? What shadow is asking to be loved rather than exiled? When you do this, something subtle and revolutionary happens. Reality becomes less adversarial and more intimate. The stranger on the street is no longer an archetype you fight. They're a mirror you learn from. The headline stops being a command to panic. It becomes information you can meet with clarity. The child's tantrum is not a personal attack. It's a tiny nervous system asking for regulation. You stop leaking your unmet needs onto the world and start meeting them like an adult soul. Parents, this is world work disguised as homework. Teach your children early that their anger is a message, not a verdict. Show them how to sit with shame, without swallowing it whole. Let them see you apologize without collapsing. Create without permission and rest without guilt. Help them name their inner weather so they don't grow up outsourcing storms to other people. A child who is allowed to integrate their shadow doesn't need to build an enemy to feel strong. That's how cycles break quietly in kitchens and car rides, through language and example. The culture will tell you there's no time for this. It will insist that urgency is virtue. But the soul does not move on the clock of panic. It moves on the clock of presence. You will not miss your life by tending to it. You will miss it by sprinting past it. And here's the paradox. When you stop sprinting, your actual contribution grows. Creativity returns. Humor returns. Energy stops hemorrhaging into argument and becomes available for art, service, invention, repair. A fulfilled person has nothing left to project and everything left to give. Jung didn't ask us to be perfect. He asked us to be whole. Wholeness is not the absence of darkness. It is friendship with it. When you befriend your darkness, you stop weaponizing it. When you stop weaponizing it, you become safe to be around. Safety is contagious. Communities form around that warmth. Policy and protest built to top that warmth stop curdling into contempt. Rescue efforts grounded in that warmth don't become control. This is how the outer world begins to resemble an inner reconciliation. One nervous system, one family, one neighborhood at a time. Thank you for watching and for being part of this reflection. If this message spoke to your heart, share it. Not just to spread words, but to remind others that real change begins within. The world transforms when even one person chooses awareness over blame. Tell me in the comments what part of you still projects outward but is really craving your acceptance. And if you'd like more soulful, mind-expanding insights like this, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom and join this growing circle of awakened hearts. Remember, the ripple begins with you. Your healing is the world's healing.